The emergency lights flashed red across the Galactic Council chamber. 500 delegates from across known space watched the holographic display with growing alarm. The image showed a blue-green planet rotating slowly in the void. Unremarkable except for one detail. It was surrounded by thousands of artificial satellites and space stations that had appeared in less than a century. Vex Tail, the Council's chief intelligence officer, stood before the assembly. His forearms gestured at the display as he spoke in the translated common tongue. This species calls themselves humans. They live on a planet they name Earth. 50 years ago, they had barely left their atmosphere. Today, they have colonies on 17 worlds across 3 sectors. A murmur ran through the chamber. Unauthorized colonization was rare. Most species spent decades in diplomatic negotiations before settling even a single new world. The Council existed precisely to manage such expansion and prevent conflict. How did we not detect this? Asked Council Speaker Murgath, her crystalline voice sharp with irritation. Vex Tal's expression darkened. They disguised their settlements as automated mining operations. Our sensors detected machinery and assumed no biological presence. By the time we investigated, each site had populations in the thousands. On Earth, Day One stood in the Sol Space Center, watching the same data his team had intercepted. The tall scientist adjusted his glasses and smiled slightly. The Council had finally noticed. It had taken them long enough. He turned to his assistant. Prepare the diplomatic shuttle. They'll want to talk now. 3 days later, Day One's ship approached the massive Council monitoring station at the edge of human-explored space. The structure was enormous, built by civilizations that had mastered space travel for millennia. His small vessel looked like an insect beside it. The Council reception chamber was designed to intimidate. Vextau and 4 other officials waited behind a raised platform. They expected the human to show fear or deference. Instead, Day One walked in calmly, set his briefcase on the table, and smiled. "Thank you for meeting with me," he said in perfect common tongue. "We've been hoping to establish formal contact." Vextal leaned forward. "You have violated 17 territorial agreements and settled worlds without authorization. Explain yourself." Day One tilted his head. "Which territories?" "We checked all the worlds carefully. No structures, no claims, no populations. Under Earth law, unclaimed land is available for settlement. We assumed galactic law worked the same way. Galactic law requires Council approval before any colonization," Vextal said coldly. "I see," Day One replied. "That wasn't in any of the databases we accessed. May I ask why empty worlds need to remain empty?" The question hung in the air. The Council officials exchanged glances. Finally, Murdath spoke through the communication system. "Order must be maintained. Uncontrolled expansion leads to conflict." Day One nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. But we haven't encountered anyone else on these worlds. How can there be conflict if no one else is there?" Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, Ji Wu guided her merchant vessel through a busy trade station. She had been running cargo for 3 years now, moving between human colonies and alien ports. Her ship, the Bison Dream, carried everything from Earth textiles to processed metals. She docked at a Quellan trading post and was greeted by her regular contact, a 6-legged merchant named Threk. "Ji Wu, you brought the power cells?" 2,000 units, just like you ordered." She activated the cargo bay doors. "I also brought some of those coffee beans you liked." Threk's antennae vibrated with pleasure. "Excellent. My customers ask for them constantly. Human goods are so reliable." Ji Wu smiled. This was the 3rd station where her products had become essential to local trade. She hadn't asked for Council permission to trade. The thought had never occurred to her. If someone wanted to buy, and she wanted to sell. Why would they need anyone else's approval? Back at the council station, Vextal pulled up more data. We have records of human ships in 43 systems. Your merchant vessels operate throughout the frontier. Trade is how we survive, Day One said simply. We offer goods, others buy them. Everyone benefits. Without regulation, without oversight, without council authorization. We didn't know we needed authorization. No one told us. Day One's voice remained calm. We found intelligent life. We said hello. We offered to trade. They said yes. What should we have done differently? The council officials realized they were dealing with something unprecedented. This species genuinely didn't understand they had done anything wrong. They had explored, settled, and traded with the casual confidence of people who assumed the universe worked like their home planet. Vextal tried a different approach. What if another species wanted your colony worlds? Then we'd negotiate, Day One said. If they had a legitimate claim, we'd work something out. If they tried to take the worlds by force, we'd defend ourselves. Isn't that standard? And if the council ordered you to leave? Day One's smile faded slightly. That would be difficult. Those colonies are home to hundreds of thousands of people. Children have been born there. Farms are established. Factories are running. You're asking us to abandon functioning societies. You should have considered that before settling without permission. Permission from whom? The rocks and dirt? Day One leaned forward. With respect, we didn't think empty space belonged to anyone. The council session continued for hours. Finally, Ambassador Hyan Su was brought in via communication link from Earth. The older man listened to the council's concerns with a patient expression. Ambassador, Murdath said, will humanity comply with council regulations regarding expansion? Hyan Su considered the question carefully. He thought about the millions of humans who had left Earth seeking new opportunities. He thought about the colonies that had become self-sufficient communities. He thought about the merchants and explorers who had made lives among the stars. No, he said simply. The chamber fell silent. You refuse to comply with galactic law? Vextal asked, his voice dangerous. We refuse to abandon our people and our homes based on regulations we never agreed to, Hyan Su clarified. If you wish to negotiate new agreements, we're willing to talk. But we won't simply retreat because you demand it. Murdath's image flickered with anger. Then the council will have no choice but to act. Hyan Su nodded slowly. That's your decision to make. But understand that we won't make it easy. We're not warriors, but we're not helpless either. After the humans left, the council convened in private session. The debate lasted for 2 days. Finally, they reached a decision. Humanity was too dangerous to ignore. Their casual disregard for authority, their rapid expansion, their integration into frontier economies, all of it threatened the carefully maintained order. The decree was drafted and approved. Humanity would be banned from further expansion. All colonies would be evacuated. Economic sanctions would be enforced. Any human vessel detected beyond their home system would be destroyed. The council believed this would solve the problem. They had no idea how wrong they were. The council's decree arrived on every human colony simultaneously. The message was clear and absolute. All settlements beyond Earth's solar system must be evacuated within one standard galactic cycle, approximately 18 Earth months. Any human vessel found beyond the designated boundary would be destroyed without warning. Trade with humanity was now forbidden under penalty of sanctions. On the colony world that humans called New Jeju, Administrator Minna read the decree 3 times. Then she started laughing. Her assistant, a young man named June, looked confused. What's funny? He asked. Min gestured out the window of her office. Below them, a settlement of 40,000 people went about their daily lives. Farmers tended fields of earth crops adapted to the local soil. Children played in parks. The manufacturing district hummed with activity. The hospital had just delivered its 500th baby born on this world. "They want us to leave all this," she said. "They want those children to abandon the only home they've ever known. They want us to tell the farmers to walk away from 3 years of work preparing the soil. They want us to shut down factories that supply 6 other colonies. So what do we do?" June asked .min-, filed the decree in her computer, and turned back to her work. "We continue building. If they want us gone, they'll have to come remove us themselves." The message was the same across all 17 human colonies. Not one began evacuation procedures. They had come to these worlds legally, as far as they understood the law. They had harmed no one. They had built communities from nothing. They weren't leaving. On Earth, Captain Tae-Yang reviewed the readiness reports from his fleet. The Council thought humanity had a few exploration vessels and merchant ships. They had no idea what humans had actually been building. While diplomats talked and scientists explored, military planners had prepared. They remembered Earth's history, the wars and conflicts that had taught hard lessons about survival. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. That was the human way. Tae-Yang's battle group included 6 carriers, 20 destroyers, and 40 support craft. All had been constructed in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, hidden among rocks the Council had dismissed as worthless. Human engineers had turned those rocks into shipyards. "Status report," Tae-Yang ordered. His tactical officer responded immediately. All vessels at full readiness. Defense platforms online. Weapons charged. Long-range sensors tracking Council fleet movements. Good. Maintain standard patrols. Don't look aggressive, but make sure they see us. The Council enforcement fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system 3 weeks later. 20 massive warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a city. Their commander, a veteran warrior named Kreltok, expected to find primitive defenses and frightened humans ready to negotiate. Instead, his sensors detected 100 defense platforms in orbital positions around the system's asteroid belt. Each platform bristled with weapons. Behind them, human warships held formation, waiting. "How?" Kreltok muttered. "How did they build all this?" His science officer had an answer. "The platforms use unstable energy cores that our safety protocols forbid. The weapon systems bypass standard coolant requirements by using disposable heat sinks. Everything is built with principles we consider too dangerous." "And do they work?" "Our analysis suggests yes. Very effectively." Kreltok found himself in an unexpected situation. His fleet was powerful, but the humans had prepared their home system well. An attack would succeed eventually, but the cost would be enormous. He sent a message back to the Council requesting instructions. On New Jeju, Minha received a personal message from a Council official. It was almost polite. They understood evacuation would be difficult. They were willing to extend the deadline. Surely reasonable people could reach an agreement. She responded immediately. "We are reasonable people. We're willing to discuss how we can coexist peacefully. We're not willing to discuss abandonment of our homes." The official's reply was less polite. Did she not understand the consequences of defiance? Min-Ha's response was simple. "What consequences? Will you bomb farming communities? Will you kill children? Will you destroy hospitals? And if you do, what will that make you?" At a Council diplomatic station, Sang Woo sat across from his assigned handler, an intelligence operative named Vex Rao. They had been meeting for months, long before the ban. Vex Rao had believed he was recruiting Sang Woo as an informant. Now he wasn't so sure. "Your people are being unreasonable. Vex Ral said. Sang Wu sipped his tea calmly. From our perspective, you're being unreasonable. You're demanding we abandon our homes because of laws we never agreed to follow. Galactic law applies to everyone. Did anyone ask us if we agreed to these laws? Did we sign a treaty? Did we have any voice in creating these rules? Sang Wu shook his head. You made decisions about the galaxy and assumed everyone would obey. We're showing you that assumption was wrong. The Council maintains order. The Council maintains control, Sang Wu corrected. Order and control aren't the same thing. Order emerges from mutual benefit and respect. Control requires force. Vex Raw realized that this human had never been his informant. Sang Wu had been gathering information about the Council while pretending to cooperate. You deceived me. No, Sang Wu said. I answered your questions honestly. You assumed I would tell you everything. I simply chose what to share. Back in Earth's solar system, young engineer Yuna checked her defense grid calculations for the 10th time. She had designed the system using principles her professors had called experimental and dangerous. The energy cores ran hot, the weapons cycled faster than recommended safety margins, and the whole thing violated at least 15 Council engineering standards. But it worked. She had tested it extensively. The platforms could engage targets at ranges Council weapons couldn't match. The response time was faster than any alien defense system. Yes, it was dangerous, but humans had always been willing to accept risk. Her supervisor entered the control room. The Council fleet is still holding position at the boundary. They're not advancing. They won't, Yuna said confidently. They ran the numbers. They know what it would cost to break through. And if they're willing to pay that cost? Yuna's expression hardened. Then we make sure the price is even higher than they calculated. Across human space, the response to the ban was uniform. Colonies continued operating. Merchant ships kept flying, now using routes that avoided Council patrols. Human navigation techniques allowed them to use jump points the Council considered unstable, meaning they appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Captain Ji Wu learned the patrol schedules and simply wasn't where the Council expected her to be. Her ship carried goods between human and alien ports, ignoring the trade prohibition. When a Quellan station master expressed concern about sanctions, she pointed out that the Council was 3 sectors away, and she was here, now with supplies they needed. The ban was failing before it truly began. The Council had made an assumption that proved catastrophically wrong. They assumed humans would respond like other species, with negotiation, with gradual escalation, with respect for authority. Instead, humans responded with simple defiance. Not aggressive, not apologetic, just utterly unwilling to comply with demands they considered unjust. The colonies stayed. The ships kept flying. The trade continued. After 6 weeks, Kreltok finally received clear orders from the Council. Do not engage Earth's defenses. The cost was too high, and the precedent too dangerous. Instead, enforce the ban on colonial worlds where defenses were lighter. He set course for New Jeju, the closest human colony. Perhaps these isolated settlements would be more reasonable than the heavily defended home system. Perhaps they would see sense when faced with overwhelming military force. He had no idea he was sailing directly into the second great miscalculation of the Council's plan. The colonies weren't isolated and helpless. They were prepared, determined, and absolutely certain they were in the right. 6 months after the Council's ban, Vextal reviewed intelligence reports with growing frustration. The human colonies had not evacuated. Instead, they had expanded. New settlements appeared on 12 additional worlds. Trade with frontier species had increased. And most troubling of all, human influence was spreading in ways the Council had never anticipated. On the frontier world of Kepler 442b, B.O. Ram stood before her first class at humanity's newest university. The auditorium held 200 students from 17 different species. Most came from frontier worlds where council education was limited or non-existent. "Welcome to practical engineering," BORAM said, her voice carrying through the translation devices every student wore. "This course is different from what you might have learned elsewhere. We don't focus on theory and tradition. We focus on what works." A Quellan student raised 3 of his limbs. "But the Council Academy teaches established principles, tested methods, safe procedures." Ba-Orim smiled. "And those are fine if you have unlimited time and resources. But what if you need to solve a problem today? What if the established method doesn't situation? That's what we'll explore here." She pulled up a holographic display showing a malfunctioning water recycler, a common problem on frontier colonies. "The council solution requires 3 weeks and specialized parts shipped from the core worlds. Anyone want to guess what we'll learn to do?" A young human student grinned. "Fix it with spare parts and hope?" "Better than hope," BORAM said. "Fix it with understanding and improvisation. By the end of this course, you'll be able to repair, rebuild, or redesign almost any system using whatever you have available." The class was one of dozens the university offered, all focused on practical skills, creative problem-solving, and adapting technology to local conditions. Students graduated ready to actually do things, not just understand theoretical principles. The council sent a formal complaint. Humanity was operating an unauthorized educational institution. BORAM sent back a cheerful response. "We're teaching anyone who wants to learn. If that's illegal, you'll have to arrest knowledge itself." In space between the settled worlds, Captain Jehi guided her merchant vessel through a jump point the council had marked with hazard warnings. The gravitational anomalies made it unstable by council standards, but human pilots had learned to read the fluctuations and ride them safely. Her ship emerged in a system the council rarely patrolled, perfect for the business she was conducting, delivering manufactured goods to colonies that officially didn't trade with humans anymore. The colonists needed the supplies. She needed the business. The council's ban was an inconvenience, not a barrier. Approaching Station Quell 7, her co-pilot announced J. She nodded. "Standard approach. Let's not make this dramatic." The station's dockmaster, a Quellan named Brex, greeted her over the communication channel. "Captain Jehi, we weren't expecting you for another week. Found a faster route. You said you needed those medical supplies urgently?" "Desperately. We have an outbreak in the southern sector." Brex's voice lowered. "I should tell you, a council patrol came through 3 days ago. They're watching for human ships." He laughed. "They're always watching. They never catch anyone because they don't know where to look. We'll be done loading and gone. They complete their next sweep." She was right. 2 hours later, her ship jumped away carrying agricultural equipment the Quellans had traded. The council patrol arrived 4 hours after that, found nothing, and moved on. This pattern repeated daily across 100 frontier systems. On a dying Quellan colony world, Donghayan stood in a greenhouse that smelled of decay. The colony's algae synthesis system had collapsed, and without it, their atmospheric processors were failing. The council had promised aid, but bureaucratic delays meant help was months away. "Show me what you've tried," Donghayan said to the colony's chief scientist. They walked through the facility. The Quellans had followed every council protocol perfectly. That was the problem. The protocols assumed certain conditions that didn't match this world's chemistry. Donghayan spent 2 days analyzing the local environment. Then he taught them a human technique using modified Earth algae strains that could adapt to varying conditions. The council would never approve such an uncontrolled biological introduction. Donghayan didn't care. "These strains are aggressive," he explained. They'll outcompete most native organisms in your processors. That's dangerous in nature, which is why you'll keep them contained. But in a controlled environment, it means they'll work when everything else fails. 3 weeks later, the colony's atmospheric processors were functioning better than they had in years. The colony administrator sent formal thanks to Earth and an equally formal complaint to the Council about the delay in their promised aid. The Council suddenly faced a political problem. If they punished the Quellans for accepting human help, they looked tyrannical. If they did nothing, they set a precedent that their ban was meaningless. Reporter HFY had been documenting human colonies since the ban was announced. Her broadcasts went out through independent networks that the Council couldn't fully control. She showed farmers working fields, children attending schools, communities celebrating festivals. She interviewed alien neighbors who spoke positively about human settlements. The Council says humanity is dangerous, HFY said into her camera. But look around. Do you see danger? Or do you see people building lives and helping their neighbors? Her interview with a Quellan merchant went viral across frontier networks. The humans? They're good neighbors. They trade fairly, they share knowledge, and when we had problems with raiders, they helped us establish defenses. I don't understand what the Council wants from them. Public opinion in frontier space was shifting. The Council represented order and stability, but they seemed distant and slow. Humans represented change and chaos, but they were helpful and present. At New Jeju, Commander Su Bin watched the Council fleet approach on her tactical display. 20 warships, the same group that had declined to attack Earth. Now they were coming to enforce the ban on a supposedly vulnerable colony. All defense platforms active, her tactical officer reported. Ground-based missiles armed. Fighter squadrons ready to launch. Su Bin opened a communication channel to the Council fleet. Commander Krelltalk, this is Commander Su Bin of the new Jeju Defense Force. You're approaching an inhabited civilian settlement. State your intentions. Krelltalk's response carried surprise. Defense Force? This is a farming colony. It's a community of 40,000 people who have the right to defend their homes. Your intentions, please? There was a long pause. Krelltalk reviewed his tactical display. The colony had defense platforms that matched military-grade equipment. The power readings suggested weapons that could seriously damage his ships. And scattered across the system were what appeared to be mining vessels. But his sensors detected weapon signatures. The colony had militarized. Not aggressively, not with the goal of conquest, but with clear defensive intent. We're here to enforce the Council's evacuation order, Krelltalk said. Though his voice had lost its certainty, Su Bin's reply was calm and reasonable. We're not evacuating. You have two choices. You can attack a civilian colony, kill thousands of people including children, and start a war. Or you can leave and report to the Council that the ban is unenforceable. You would fight? We would defend our homes. Wouldn't you do the same? Krelltalk looked at the tactical situation. His fleet could win, but it would be bloody. His ships would be damaged. His crews would die. And for what? To destroy farms and schools? To make children homeless? He remembered his own people's history, the wars they had fought to protect their settlements. He thought about the reports of humans helping sick colonies, teaching practical skills, trading fairly with frontier species. These weren't monsters. They were just people who refused to abandon their homes. We're withdrawing, Krelltalk announced to his fleet. Break orbit and set course for Council space. His subordinates protested, but he overruled them. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Some orders were wrong, even when they came from legitimate authority. As the Council fleet jumped away, Min-Ah joined Su Bin in the command center. They'll be back eventually. Maybe, Su Bin agreed. But each time they choose not to fight, our position grows stronger. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We're just living. Eventually, the Council will realize they can't stop that. Across human space, the pattern repeated. The colonies stayed. The trade continued. The teaching spread. And slowly, inevitably, the galaxy began to change around the Council's outdated rules. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with angry voices. The emergency session had been called after 3 member species abstained from the latest vote to enforce sanctions against humanity. The carefully maintained unity that had governed the galaxy for centuries was cracking. Speaker Murdath called for order, but the delegates ignored her. A young delegate from the Therian Collective stood at her podium, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm Co Jin, and I have a question," she said. The chamber quieted slightly. "Can anyone explain to me exactly what harm humanity has caused?" Vextal rose immediately. "They violated settlement protocols they never agreed to follow," Seojin interrupted. "What actual harm? Have they attacked anyone? Have they stolen resources that belong to another species? Have they caused any destruction?" The silence stretched. Finally, Murdath spoke. "They threatened the established order." "That's not harm," Seojin said. "That's change. Why does the order exist? To prevent conflict and promote prosperity, correct?" She pulled up data on her display. Frontier trade has increased by 40% since humans began operating. Border conflicts have decreased. 2 colonies were saved from environmental collapse by human aid. Where is the harm? An older delegate stood. "If we allow this, other species will think they can ignore Council authority." "Maybe they should," Seojin replied quietly. "If the authority is unjust." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted at each other. The fracture that had been growing for months split wide open. On Earth, philosopher Wunschik published his treatise the same day. He titled it "Authority Without Consent, A Challenge to Galactic Governance." The text spread through academic networks with stunning speed. Wunschik's central argument was simple. The Council claimed authority over all spacefaring species, but most species had never agreed to be governed by it. The Council existed when they achieved spaceflight, and they were simply expected to obey. This was not legitimate government, it was inherited tyranny. "Legitimate authority requires consent," Wunschik wrote. "The governed must have a voice in the rules that govern them." The Council speaks of maintaining order, but whose order? Who benefits from these rules? Follow the question far enough, and you find that the Council primarily maintains its own power. Within weeks, the treatise was required reading in universities across 20 systems. Students debated its arguments. Professors incorporated it into political philosophy courses. Some Council members tried to ban it, which only made it more popular. The economic pressure was equally powerful. Kyung Mi had built a consortium that included humans, Quellans, Therians, and a dozen other frontier species. Her trading network operated on principles that seemed radical to the Council: voluntary exchange, competitive pricing, and minimal regulation. A Quellan merchant explained it to a Council trade inspector. "The human system works better. I make an offer. The buyer accepts or rejects. If they reject, I find another buyer or lower my price. No forms to file. No quotas to meet. No waiting months for approval." "But there's no oversight," the inspector protested. "No quality control." The merchant gestured at his warehouse full of goods. "The quality control is simple. If I sell bad products, customers stop buying from me. If I treat people fairly and offer good value, they come back. It works." Kyung Mi's consortium was now more profitable than most Council-sanctioned trade. Merchants who joined prospered. Those who stuck with Council regulations found themselves losing business. The invisible hand of the market was giving the Council an invisible push toward irrelevance. Then, Vex Ran, a Council military leader, decided to make an example. He ordered his fleet to destroy a human cargo vessel in neutral space. The ship was unmanned, controlled by AI, but it carried valuable goods. Vexron wanted to show that the Council still had teeth. The wreckage drifted in space, broadcast on every news network. Vexron gave a speech about respecting Council authority. He thought he had delivered a powerful message. Chang Ho, the human diplomatic envoy, waited exactly 1 day. Then he released documents his intelligence service had been holding. They detailed 40 instances in the past decade where Vexron's own species had violated Council space law. Unauthorized mining operations, undeclared military exercises, settlement violations. Every species violated Council law when convenient. The Council knew it and usually looked the other way because strict enforcement would paralyze the government. But now that hypocrisy was public and undeniable, Vexron tried to defend himself. Chang Ho released more documents, this time showing similar violations by 7 other Council member species, including some of the loudest voices demanding human compliance. The Council enforces its rules selectively, Chang Ho announced to the gathered press. When powerful species violate the law, it's overlooked. When humanity does the same, it's called a crisis. This isn't justice. It's power protecting itself. The scandal rocked the Council. 3 delegates resigned. 2 member species threatened to leave the Council entirely. The unified front against humanity collapsed completely. In a medical facility on New Jeju, In Soon made a breakthrough. He had been working with Quellan geneticists on age extension therapy, combining human and alien medical knowledge. The result was a treatment that could extend healthy lifespan by up to 30%. The treatment worked across species lines with minor modifications. It was safe, tested, and ready for distribution. In Soon could have patented it, made it exclusive, charged enormous fees. Instead, he released the research publicly. Medical knowledge should be free, he explained to reporters. Keeping people healthy isn't a business opportunity. It's a moral obligation. The Council had no response. They couldn't suppress medical treatment that saved lives without revealing that they cared more about control than welfare. If they tried to claim the research was stolen, they'd have to explain why they hadn't developed it themselves despite having access to the same knowledge. The age extension therapy spread rapidly. Clinics across frontier space began offering it. Lives were extended. Suffering was reduced. And everyone knew it came from human-alien cooperation, not from Council-approved research. Young Seo Jin stood before the Council once more, 3 months after her first challenge. This time she had support from a dozen other delegates. "I'm calling for a vote," she announced. "Not on human compliance, on Council legitimacy." Murdath tried to stop her. "This is not the proper forum." "This is exactly the proper forum," Seo Jin said. "The Council claims to serve the galaxy. Let's ask if the galaxy wants to be served this way." The vote she called was simple. Should the Galactic Council dissolve and reform with a new charter that included all spacefaring species as equal participants? The debate lasted for days. Elder delegates argued that the Council had maintained peace for centuries. Younger delegates pointed out that the Council maintained peace by preventing growth and change. The current system served old, established species at the expense of younger ones and frontier colonies. "Look at what humanity accomplished without our oversight," Seo Jin argued. "They expanded, innovated, and helped others. Yes, they disrupted our orderly systems. But our orderly systems were creating stagnation." The vote was close. When the count finished, Murdath stared at the results in disbelief. The motion had passed by a narrow margin. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for centuries, would dissolve. In her office on New Jeju, Min read the news, and allowed herself a small smile. She had never wanted to destroy the council. She had just wanted to live freely, to build a home, to raise her community in peace. The council had made that desire into a revolution simply by insisting it required their permission. One chick, watching the same news on Earth, was already writing his next essay. This one would explore what came next, how to build galactic governance that actually served the governed instead of merely ruling them. Kyung-Mai was calculating the business opportunities. A reformed galactic government would need new trade networks, new regulations, new systems. She was already positioning her consortium to help build them. Insum continued his medical research. Now, with eager partners from a dozen species, no longer afraid of council disapproval, and across human space, people who had simply wanted to explore, to settle, to trade, to learn, and to help continued doing exactly that. They hadn't set out to topple a government. They had just refused to stop living because authority said they should. The council had tried to ban humanity. Instead, humanity had accidentally shown the galaxy that the ban and the authority behind it was the real problem. 20 years had passed since the council banned humanity from the stars. The ban had lasted 18 months before becoming unenforceable. Now, Ambassador Jinho stood before the inaugural session of the Galactic Assembly, the organization that had risen from the council's ashes. The assembly chamber looked similar to the old council room, but the differences mattered. Every spacefaring species had a seat, not just the old powers. Votes were transparent. Debates were public. And most importantly, the assembly's authority came from voluntary agreement, not inherited power. Jinho was older now, his hair gray, but his voice remained strong. We gather here not as subjects of authority, but as participants in cooperation. The old council tried to ban humanity because we didn't follow their rules. Today we acknowledge a simple truth. Rules must serve people, not restrict them. He gestured to the diverse delegates. Humanity didn't set out to overthrow the council. We simply wanted to explore, to settle, to build lives among the stars. When told we needed permission for this, we asked a question. Permission from whom and why? That question changed everything. Not because we're special, but because it was the right question to ask. Around the galaxy, the changes that question had sparked were everywhere. Explorer Na Young commanded the Starship Discovery, leading the first joint expedition into uncharted space. Her crew included 15 species, each bringing unique perspectives and skills. The ship itself was a perfect symbol of the new era human engineering, with Quellan efficiency improvements, Therian sensor arrays, and contributions from a dozen other species. Jump. Coordinates calculated. Her Quellan navigator announced, entering unknown space in 3.2. The Discovery emerged in a star system that no one had ever seen. 3 planets showed signs of biological activity. One had primitive radio signals, evidence of a developing civilization. First contact protocols, Na Young ordered. And remember, we observe unless invited. We offer help when asked. We never assume we know what's best for others. These principles had been written into the Assembly's charter, learned from humanity's conflict with the Council. The galaxy had spent centuries trying to manage other species. The new approach was to work with them instead. In the Assembly's judicial chambers, Judge Yun-ji heard a case between a Therian mining company and a frontier colony. The dispute was over resource rights to an asteroid field. Under council law, established corporations had priority. Under Assembly principles, things were more complicated. EUNG listened to both sides carefully. The corporation had invested heavily in exploration. The colony needed resources to survive. Both had legitimate claims. This court rules that the asteroid field will be shared, Yunji announced. The corporation gets priority access to 70% of the field. The colony receives guaranteed access to 30% and technical training in mining operations from the corporation. The corporation representatives started to protest, but Yunji continued. You wanted all the resources. The colony wanted survival. Both of you get something. Both of you compromise. That's how peaceful coexistence works. Her rulings prioritized mediation over punishment, solutions over strict adherence to rules. Some called her soft. Others pointed out that her decisions actually resolved conflicts instead of just declaring winners and losers. On Earth, historian Seok Min taught a classroom full of students about the contact era. One student raised his hand. Why did the Council fear humans so much? Seok Min considered the question. Fear is the wrong word. The Council was designed to prevent chaos, to maintain order. Humanity represented unpredictability. We didn't follow the patterns they expected, but we didn't hurt anyone. That's exactly right. The Council realized that authority based on tradition and power was vulnerable to people who simply didn't recognize that authority. We didn't rebel against them. We just ignored them and did what we thought was right. Another student asked, is that why they tried to stop us? They tried to stop the idea we represented, Seok Min explained. The idea that maybe the old ways weren't the only ways. That maybe rules could be questioned. That maybe authority needed to justify itself instead of just existing. And they failed? Seok Min smiled. They changed. That's better than failing. The old council members who supported the ban aren't punished or exiled. They're just less relevant now. The galaxy moved on without them. In space between the colonies, Han-Ul piloted her cargo vessel through a region that had once been forbidden to humanity. Now it was just space open, available, free for anyone to use. She carried medical supplies to a frontier clinic, part of her regular route. Traffic control. This is cargo vessel Morning Light, requesting docking clearance. Cleared. Morning Light, Bay 7 is open. Simple, routine. No questions about her species, or whether she had permission to be there. She was just a ship, delivering supplies, doing business. The way it should be. Han-Ul remembered her grandmother's stories about the early days, when every jump was an adventure and every colony was a pioneer settlement. Now things were more settled, more organized. Some people said that was boring. She disagreed. This wasn't boring. This was success. The adventure had been necessary, but the goal was always to reach a point where crossing the stars was normal. The Galactic Assembly held its annual summit on a rotating schedule, each year on a different member world. This year it was Earth's turn. Delegates from 200 species gathered in New Seoul's Conference Center Gachin-O, watched them arrive with quiet satisfaction. 20 years ago, the Council had demanded humanity stop existing beyond their home system. Now Earth hosted the galaxy's government, not as conquerors or rulers, but as partners. A young Quellan delegate approached him. Ambassador Jin-Ho, I wanted to thank you. My colony exists because humans helped us when the Council wouldn't. Jin-Ho shook his head. Don't thank me. Thank the people who did the work. Thank Dong-Ein, who shared agricultural techniques. Thank Kyung-Mi, who built fair trading networks. Thank Bo Orem, who taught practical skills. I just talked. Talking matters too, the delegate said. You made people think. That had been humanity's real gift to the galaxy, Jin-Ho reflected. Not technology or weapons or even the colonies themselves. The gift was a question. What if things could be different? In the assembly session, Seo Jing proposed new regulations for first contact with undiscovered civilizations. The debate was vigorous. Multiple species offered perspectives. Compromises were reached. The final version satisfied no one completely, which meant it was probably fair. This was the new order, messy, argumentative, chaotic, and infinitely more alive than the Council had ever been. The old system had maintained order through control. The new system maintained peace through negotiation and mutual benefit. On New Jeju, Mina was retiring. She had served as administrator for 20 years, turning a frontier settlement into a thriving city. Her replacement was a young woman named Hai Jin, born on this world, who had never seen Earth. Any advice? Hai Jin asked Min Dash, looked out at the city she had helped build. Remember why we're here. Not to conquer space or prove something to the galaxy. Just to live. To build good lives for ourselves and our neighbors. Keep that simple goal in mind, and the rest follows. The retirement ceremony was attended by humans, Quellans, Therians, and representatives from a dozen other species who lived on New Jeju now. The colony had become exactly what Min had always imagined, a place where different people built a shared home. Philosopher Wonshik, now elderly, gave a lecture at Seoul University. Students packed the auditorium, hanging on his words about liberty, cooperation, and legitimate governance. The lesson of humanity's conflict with the Council is simple, he said. Authority that cannot justify itself deserves to be questioned. Rules that serve only those in power deserve to be changed. And any system that fears questions is already failing. A student asked, "But don't we need authority? Don't we need rules?" Of course, Wonshik agreed. But authority should serve us, not the other way around. Rules should enable prosperity and peace, not restrict freedom for its own sake. The difference matters. On Kepler 442b, Bao Ram's University had grown into one of the galaxy's premier engineering schools. Students came from everywhere to learn practical problem-solving and creative innovation. The Council Academy still taught traditional methods, but many graduates came to Kepler 442b for advanced training that actually prepared them for real-world challenges. Insung's age extension. Therapy was now standard across civilized space. He had moved on to other research, always working with multinational teams, always releasing results publicly. His philosophy remained simple. Knowledge was meant to be shared. Kongmi's trading consortium had evolved into the Galactic Trade Network, a voluntary association that facilitated commerce without heavy regulation. It worked because participants found it useful, not because anyone forced them to join. And everywhere, in ways large and small, the galaxy was different. More open, more dynamic, more willing to try new approaches and question old assumptions. The Council's ban on humanity had lasted 18 months. The effects would shape the galaxy for millennia, because humanity hadn't just refused to obey. They had showed everyone that obedience to unjust authority was optional. That empty space belonged to whoever had the courage to venture into it. That rules existed to serve people, not control them. Yong-Soo told this story to his class of young students. And that's how humans changed the galaxy. Not through war or conquest, but by simply refusing to ask permission to exist. A child raised her hand. Were the Council people bad? No, Yong-Soo said. They were just wrong. They believed order was more important than freedom. They thought stability was more valuable than growth. They were wrong, but that doesn't make them evil. It makes them human. He paused. Well, not human exactly. But you understand. The children laughed. Someday they would venture to the stars, these children. Some would explore new worlds. Others would trade or teach or heal. They would carry forward the legacy of those who had refused to stop simply because authority said no. The galaxy was not unified under human rule. It was not unified under anyone's rule. It was a chaotic, argumentative, wildly innovative collection of species that traded, debated, competed, and cooperated. and for the first time in Council history, it was growing instead of stagnating. The ban had failed. The galaxy had changed, and humans, having sparked that change, simply continued being what they always were: curious, stubborn, helpful, and absolutely certain that empty space was meant to be filled with life.